Everyone is fighting the ancient dragon wrong. This fight is known to be a boring and tedious chore because everyone is making it more annoying by trying to cheese him by fighting his feet or tail. Not only does it make his moveset less interesting, but it also makes it much harder to dodge his fire breath. I'm making this video because I recently saw a pretty good Dark Souls 2 playthrough, but noticed that she also got recommended the cheese tactic that just makes it worse. I highly recommend watching her video because even though she states that she is bad at video games, she's actually showing a lot more skill and insight than the DS2 haters that I'm usually addressing. This video is not a critique of her, but of the community always recommending a bad approach of fighting the ancient dragon. Before I show her clip, first, here are some examples.
So what I can say is that they each have large and simplistic exploits. For example, the ancient dragon simply requires that each time it jumps, run to the tail, wait for it to land, hack away, and repeat.
And it has some of the most easily exploitable dumbass AI that I have ever seen, and it's just kind of a disgrace to be in the game.
The best strategy for maximal DPS is to hit his tail, trigger his tail smack, hit his leg to trigger his stomp, and then keep switching between hitting his legs and tail until he flies up. Once he flies up, you follow the tail to avoid the fire, and then hit the tail again to repeat the process.
But the problem is that it's not a very good fight because it takes a while to beat him, but you can really easily exploit his attacks and get into a strategy where you can just sort of go move from his right foot, his front right foot, or when you're going in, the foot that's on the right side, and then run to his tail, and then go back to that foot, then go back to his tail, go back to the foot, attack a couple of times, go back to the tail, go back to the foot, attack a couple of times, go back to the tail. Do this over and over again, and he just does the same attacks over and over again on repeat. So, which means that you can exploit his AI and defeat him really easily.
Everyone seems to think that this is the best strategy, even though the tail only takes half the damage and you are much more likely to get hit by the fire breath.
Being anywhere in the dragon's front hemisphere was simply a no-go, which was frustrating as that's the direction he's facing in when you enter the arena. So if you get unlucky with his move cycle, it's going to be a rough beginning, if not completely over from the start. I started trying to just beeline for his tail to deal damage that way, as it's as far away from his mouth as possible, and it was somewhat effective. Get back here! Get back here! Oh my god. I was over level 170 at this point with a fully maxed out weapon, and the damage was just not satisfying. Really felt like I was doing nothing.
That's on purpose, as the game punishes players for trying to cheese this fight. The tail is actually the worst place to focus your damage on, as it is hard to hit, has the highest resistance and the most punishing moveset.
Especially since, as dragons do, he was constantly up and down. Every single time he launched himself into the sky, I dreaded the undodgeable fire.
That's again on purpose. The fire is a lot harder to dodge if you try to cheese this fight. Even if I run away as soon as he flies up, I often get hit. One problem here is that you just don't see in which direction he is aiming the fire breath. And it's harder to see when he starts this attack.
Now tell me, why am I dead when the dragon breathes fire? Tell me why no matter what direction I run in, I am still getting hit by the fire when I am at full sprint. We're gonna get hit, that's okay. We get hit again, that's unfortunate. He's up again. We get hit.
When I'm fighting him by focusing on his face, I can just casually walk away without getting hit by the fire. He just looks more imposing when faced up front, but you have to face your fears.
I then moved to the foot strat, as chat suggested. This seemed to be going a little bit better, at least because I didn't have to worry about being hit by the tail. I still got hit. It definitely seemed to be a DPS check though, because once you ran out of Estus, that was it. Despite some very close attempts, this dragon was getting to me. Imagine if I just fell off the edge.
This was the moment that prompted me to make this short video, as any chat everywhere always seems to suggest the foot strategy, even though the actually easiest strategy is to just fight him like any other dragon by hitting his face. This way I can beat him without even having to run, and as a bonus it just looks and feels more amazing as well. It's less dangerous and a lot more fun than just hitting his toes over and over again.
You need to position yourself right in between the dragon's toes, and apparently it disrupts his combat cycle, keeping him grounded for longer.
Then what? Isn't that his right leg? Oh, damn it! I thought you meant my right leg.
This allows you to deal more damage and experience fewer of those ridiculous fire attacks. I'm not sure. I don't even think I was doing it right, even when I believed I was. But at this point, I didn't care. To my knowledge, there's quite a bit of cheese in Dark Souls 2, making bosses fall off, making bosses get one-shot, pretty funny things like that. For the most part, I didn't intentionally use cheese tactics on any bosses. I wanted to fully experience the fights. However, I cannot recommend enough that you use this cheese strategy for the Ancient Dragon boss fight. It's simply not worth fighting him properly. Usually getting two-shot by a boss is understandable if you mess up. You need to learn how to dodge or avoid punishing attacks, but with Ancient Dragon, there's nothing to learn. I could have my full stamina bar and sprint to avoid his attack before the boss has even thought about doing the attack, and I would still get hit. How is that fair?
I think it's pretty fair. It's risk versus reward. Fighting against his toes makes the fight faster, as he flies up less often, but if he does, you are much more likely to get hit. The head strategy is not optimal if your weapon does not have any vertical attacks, as you might miss often, but it still turns the fight from a boring chore to something that feels a lot more epic. I just feel like people are robbing themselves of a fun boss fight by attacking his tail or toes instead of fighting him fair and square. It's a lot less frustrating, and you can feel your skill improve when you learn when it's the best time to attack his head without him moving away. You get a clear picture of where he flies off to, and you do not have to run as far away to get outside of his range. This is an optional boss. So it's especially weird that so many people try to use cheese tactics to beat him, as if bosses are just a checkmark that they have to tick off, instead of seeing them as a challenge to learn and overcome. I think that his placement in tier lists could go up 1 or 2 letters if people rated him based on fighting him regularly, instead of ranking him based on how frustrating it felt despite them trying to use cheese tactics. So many bosses become boring if you stand behind them, especially in the previous games, but I don't think that we should rate bosses based on how easy their AI can be abused, but rather how they feel if you fight them without trying to cheat yourself out of having a fair challenge. And as it's the case with the Ancient Dragon, trying to cheese him makes it feel like an unfair experience where it's really hard to outrun his fire breath, so most people cause the fight to become bad by following a guide instead of trying to see for themselves what actually works best. So, if you always hated this fight, do yourself a favor and try to fight him fair. I bet you will change your mind and see him in a much better light. I'm out of things to say, so here is just a full fight. Goodbye.